Hi friends, this is Sunil Chandy again, and this is Food for Thought, a ministry out of Christ Episcopal Church. And today we're at our choir room at Christ Church, and we're with George Kent. And George is going to talk to us a little bit about Anglican chant. And so let's bring George in as soon as we can. George, how are you doing today?
Oh, we're doing fairly well, I think. I know there have been some questions about what's going on with the chant in general, so I thought what we would do is talk about where it came from, and of course the fact that it starts with plain chant. So to do that, I think what I'd like to do is to just explain a couple of things about music in general.
Okay,
and
of
then
course.
we'll go from there, and then please feel free to question anything.
Oh, George, I would love to. This is great.
I could get lost.
Not at all. I think you're, of course, you know, folks, I do a lot of practicing with George. I haven't done it recently and I miss it. But please, George, let's begin.
Well, let's just talk about what the function of music is.
Yeah.
And basically there are two kinds of music, period. Number one, programmatic. Number two, absolute. Now, if music is programmatic, that means it's got an extra musical purpose. In other words, basically, any music with a text is going to be descriptive of whatever the text is.
Okay.
I mean, if you take Somewhere Over the Rainbow, we're thinking about Over the Rainbow.
Right.
You know, and that's programmatic music, music for an extra function, if you will. Music that is just music for music's sake alone is what we call absolute. So, for example, Beethoven, second movement of the Symphony No. 5. He's working on a musical idea. He's not trying to tell you that he's bemoaning something or whatever, you know, unhappy in love or whatever. It's really working out an idea. And the idea he's working out there is what's in the whole symphony, which is, so you hear him. So you have ta-ta-ta-ta, there it is, pa-pa-pa-pa, yeah. And then again in longer.
So that it eventually works towards a crescendo.
He's only working on an idea,
Okay.
a melodic, a rhythmic idea. And that's absolute music, you know, and that's what the great symphonists do, et cetera, et cetera. But now to get back,
Just a quick
I'd
question.
like to, yes, go ahead.
So then when we do our hymns, and with the lyrics that come with the music of those hymns,
Yeah.
the music would be programmatic, right?
Yes, the hymn is a programmatic, it has to be.
It has to be because
It's got a text.
It's got
it's you know, and some hymns are better than others at working out that text. You know, it's you got well. Ein Festburg ist unser Gott, a mighty fortress is our God. That's really, really head on. He's really, Luther took that one for a good cause. All right, now, let's just talk one other thing about music and then we'll get right into the chant.
Okay.
And that is texture.
Texture.
And here's where we start with a chant. There's
Texture.
texture of music. And here you've got one which is what we call monophonic. Two, homophonic. And three, polyphonic.
I could see maybe 1 and 2, 3. I mean, but homophonic.
Okay, well, I'll explain.
Yeah.
You just mentioned a hymn, and that's a good example. Monophonic is when everything is in unison,
Right?
such as plain chant.
Yeah.
And for centuries, that's all we had was monophonic music. Polyphonic is what they were headed towards, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But homophonic is when you think vertically. You think texture-wise vertically, and it's more than one part. As opposed to monophonic.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're...
Polyphonic is when you think horizontally and you have interweaving. And that's where we eventually got by the time we got to the Renaissance. But in the medieval period, really all music was monophonic until really the tail end of the period. Now, in terms of chant, which is monophonic, there were 5 basic kinds of chant that came up in the medieval period. And they were all really from a geographic location. You had Gregorian, which you're familiar with that term, I'm sure.
Yeah. Although I can't define it, so...
No, that's okay. No, that flourished around Rome.
Okay.
Rome. Then you had Byzantine. And that flourished where, do you think?
Antioch?
Yeah, Byzantium,
Yeah.
all of that. It was an Eastern influence.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of Eastern influence in it.
So Eastern Orthodox.
Well, even the Russian chant got somehow down. But if you think about melodies, I mean, you're in the Casbah, you know, and I'm not suggesting that that was what the chant was, because that's dance music, but there's more in Eastern influence with that. So Constantinople, all of that. Then you had Mozarabic.
Oh, I look at the chant Mozarabic, and that seems
Spain.
complex.
That's Spain.
That's Spain. It's
Yeah,
complex,
and
isn't
that's
it?
very different stuff because of the Moors' invasion. Hence, Mozarabic.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, the liturgies are really strange.
Yeah.
You probably know that. Then you had up in Switzerland, you had Gallican, because the monastery of St. Gall was a very important monastery, and there were a bunch of renegade priests up there raising the dickens. But we'll talk about that later.
All those renegade priests.
And then finally, you have Ambrosium or Milanese, Milano. So these again are all geographic, if you will.
Uh-huh.
But they all have their interesting effects, because all of the music in the medieval period is modal. And music that is modal uses what we call the church modes, come to be known as the church modes. They're only the white notes on the piano, starting from D to D. That scale, if you will, or mode. Now, if you take C, our normal C scale, the one that you're familiar with,
Yeah.
that puts a half step between mi and fa. Hear it lean in, and then it goes up and does the same thing again. But once you move that with only the white notes, that half step comes in a funny place. Hear it, right? Second step. In the string. And then the next one. They're all different, you know, and if you take and you put it in the modes, it gets a little weird. But move it into the next mode, it's even weirder. And this one really just swears at you, you know. Handel would be really upset. But so modal music throughout most of it, and this affects most of the church music, you know, in early times, right up on through the Renaissance. We don't get into tonality as a real thing until we get to the Baroque era, or 1600 to 1750. So anyway, all of this monophonic music,
Okay.
either Gregorian, Byzantine, Mozarabic, Gallican, or Ambrosian.
The Gallican is, again,
That's
from
Switzerland.
And then Ambrosian, would that be around Milan? Or
Milano.
Milano,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly, yes.
All right.
Yep.
Spain.
And they're all got their own particular quirks. Ambrosian is quite complicated. And when the chorus toured Italy, we had to sing High Mass at Milano at the cathedral. And when they asked us to do this, I immediately wrote back, what about the chant? Because I didn't want to try to put the chorus through Ambrosian chant and mess it up, you know. And they said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. So they had a men's choir to handle that during the service.
You know,
we did everything else.
Do you have an example of that? Like, well, later on.
No, it doesn't. It's all different as such. But to get to our point in
Right.
in the Episcopal
Anglican.
Church or the Anglican Church, we had all of plain chant up until, frankly, you get to Henry VIII and all of those guys, and the big upheaval in the church. One of the things that the king declared was that the services were to be in the vernacular.
Yes.
Now, which means
In the
English.
normal, yeah.
prior to that they had been
In Latin.
in the Latin, in the Roman tradition. Once you start changing language, you get into problems. I mean, for example, if I sing Deus meus, which translates,
My God.
right, now listen to it in English. My God. Totally different,
Yeah.
because we had two syllables in the Latin. Deus meus, my God, with a hard D on the end.
Yes.
Put it in German.
I don't know.
Mein Gott, with a double T. Yeah. No, but yeah, exactly. Stand back. You know. And if it's in French,
Yeah.
mon Dieu, it's almost
You can't say
romantic, you know. Mon Dieu, you know. So what has to happen? New music has to come along. Now, let me just, to get back to the plain chant, though, let me put this up on the board so you can kind of
Oh, this is exciting.
see an idea about what it was. This is Psalm 95, the Venite, and that's plain chant, and that's out of the current Psalter, the English Psalter, and the melody is up here, and it's in square notes, as you see, because all of the early music was in fact in square notes. If I give you an exact example here.
Oh, that's beautiful. George, can I help you?
No, that's okay. But here's an actual piece
Oh, careful.
of chant. Now this is real.
Yeah.
That's 14th century.
That's 14th century?
That's 14th century, that parchment.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but see the square notes?
Oh, yes, yes.
We use rounded notes, lozenge notes. Square notes, quill of the pen. Easy, you know.
It was easy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. That's why they did.
But this is a very exacting notation, and it's in many ways it's better than modern notation, and it tells you everything. You see the little thing at the end here, the custos,
Yeah.
tells you where the next note's going to be on the next line, you know, and all of that. And this is an actual from 14th century Northern Italian.
Oh my God! No, I'm just going to come a little close to you. Wow, this
You
is
can
so
see all of that,
gorgeous.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It's
14th century.
14th century, and the inks are still holding, you
Oh my
know,
God.
which is amazing. It's out of the service for the sixth hour, sextam. Yeah.
This was presented to you, George?
No,
Don't tell me you were from the 14th century.
I got very lucky. I saw it in a house auction one day years ago when I was a student.
house auction?
When I was a student,
Oh my God.
and these people were cleaning out their house and moving, you know. And I don't know what I paid peanuts for it, whatever it was. But we in this parish, many years ago, had a summer resident who was in charge of the classics department at Columbia University. And he saw it, and he translated it, and he dated it, because he said there are certain usages of the language that are only Northern Italian, 14th century. Now that's beyond me, because I'm not into Latin, but he was an expert at it, yeah, yeah. But again, square notes.
So the square notes again was.
So we still use them today,
Right.
but
so,
not.
So the reason for the square notes was that it was easy to write. It was easy.
It's easy, just to quill of the pen. You know, you can't do it. I don't have a flat, but you know that's just
Yeah, it's just easier to
they had a special pen. Those monks all night long, you know,
Yeah.
after Compline, writing all that stuff. But again, monophonic, and this works this way. So, oh come, let us sing unto the Lord. Let us heartily rejoice in the strength of our salvation. And all the verses. The Psalms were a very big part of the early service. Even today in England, in the cathedrals and collegiate chapels, the entire 150 Psalms are sung once a month. But in the early days, it was once a week.
Yes, so George, continue explaining to us about Anglican chant.
Well, I'm just saying that this is all plain chant, and Psalms being an integral part of the service, to the point where in early times, the entire 150 were done within the span of a week.
Within a week or a month?
Yeah, weekly. No, weekly. Monthly now.
Monthly now.
In collegiate chapels where they're sung. Yeah.
So they spent a lot of time in church.
Well, they sing evensong every afternoon.
Yeah.
And matins, and you know, so there's plenty of time to do them.
Yeah.
But yes, so they were a very important part of the service. But to get back to where English is finally going to be the language, then came about slowly harmonized chant, or homophonic, if you will, which is an example over here. It's a little bit of scribbling, but if I play that Psalm 84. So instead of having just this melody, now you've got soprano, alto, tenor, bass, 4-part. And all of these chants came about, all of the church composers contributing to them, you know. So, and in fact, we here at Christ Church sing, well, I was very lucky years ago when I was over in England, David Wilcox, gave me a Psalter,
Yeah.
and I copied King's pointing, which is, in other words, where does the, oh, how amiable are thy dwelling, pointing meaning where do you move from chord to chord, where is the bar line? And there are a variety of opinions on that. And it's, to be honest, it's probably one of the most abused kind of chant, because people don't really think about what's important. And again, now you're dealing with words, and you've got to make that chant fit,
Fit the pattern.
For example, oh, how amiable are thy dwellings. It sits down on dwellings. That's not a high point, Thou Lord of hosts. So I copied out by candlelight the entire 150 Psalms pointed by David Wilcox, which is what we have and what we sing. It's generally agreed that he was one of the leading exponents of good Anglican chant during the last century. But that's how we got that far. And, we're just talking about Psalms now, but what happened in the development of polyphony, which is a whole other issue, is that we had monophonic music, just one thing. And when we get to the 10th, 11th century, we start to find a second melody supporting the first one, and running in parallel motion. So if you have, at the interval of a fifth, that's what we call organum, because that's the added or organal voice. And that was the beginning. Now that's not polyphony by a long shot, because it's only two voices, but that's where it started, in what we call parallel organum.
So why did that develop in the 10th century, and not later or earlier? Why do you?
I think frankly it was just people experimenting with what they were going to do. Now it started at the interval of the octave. That's easy to understand. That's easy because that's the general distance between male and female voices, if you will, or trebles and male grown men. But then the fifth came, and then came the fourth. Didn't sound like much difference. And then we find examples of all three: fourth, fifth, octave. Yeah.
Now, are they? So would they be? Would these additions be in different, in tenor voices or in bass voices, or would it be just
male? The men would be singing
that extra. The underneath, the melody that
right,
underneath,
right. And trebles are boys, which were used in the choirs. And in the middle could be either what we would call a countertenor or possibly boy's voice that was low. As such. But parallel, not too interesting when you come right down to it. Because if you want interest in music, you've got to have some kind of friction, if you will, for lack of a better word. But you've got to have something kind of nudging against another one. I mean, that's more interesting, certainly, than, but that's where it went. And that goes all the way over into the famous School of Notre Dame in Paris, where you've got that organum. No measurement, just straight, no bar lines, no quarter notes, no half notes. Finally, you get measured organum where you add a third voice and it's wandering, it's not in parallel motion. And once that starts to happen, you've got to, it's easy enough with two parts. You write that out, it's okay, you can see where one's moving and one's stopping. But you add a third voice to that, and you better figure out how you're going to do it. So they had finally measured organum, which was called, for lack of a, give you a fancy term here, clausula.
Clausula?
Clausula was measured organum. Still, no words, just notes, no words. Once they put text to the clausula, they come up with the term motet. Now that's a word you know, but motet comes from motetus, text or word, if you will, and that was a fully texted clausula would
Now,
become a motet.
Does the clausula come from, so clausula is a German, isn't it? German or?
No, that's
So
Latin,
where was this?
Latin. I can't give you a reason for that.
So this developed in what time period again?
Oh, this was Notre Dame, it'd be in the 12th century.
12th century.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there were two very important monks there, Léonin and Perrotin. And Léonin collected all of that organum in a huge collection called the Magnus Liber Organi, Big Book of Organum. Yeah, literally. No, we have that. And he dies, and Perrotin finishes the collection, finishes his work. But that gets us up to the 14th century. And then finally, in 1360, I think in 1360, Guillaume Machaut writes the first polyphonic mass, the Mass de Notre Dame, the Mass of Our Lady. Some people think that it was written for the coronation of Charlemagne.
Charlemagne?
But yes, but there's no, that's disputed. We don't really know. He was canon at Reims Cathedral in France. And that's the first polyphonic person, by one person. There were three other masses where one person wrote the Kyrie, another person added the Gloria. Those are pistache, if you will, finger in the pie, were literally. But the first by one person was Machaut. And that gets us to, finally, a really major breakthrough into the Renaissance. And polyphony is the golden age of the Renaissance, never equaled since. And you have people like Palestrina, you have people in England like William Byrd. These were unbelievable. Palestrina was a priest. Over 96 masses he wrote.
Oh my God.
Polyphonic.
Polyphonic masses.
Just the masses alone, over 96. They're still finding pieces they think are his. It's just amazing. But again, he didn't have to watch football. or he didn't have to watch the Senate hearing.
Well, this year's football Super Bowl game wasn't that exciting either. So.
Well, yeah. Anyway, but that kind of gets you to where it all
The Renaissance.
Into polyphony.
Okay.
And Anglican chant has been with us ever since. And it's still being, there are new chants even being written in this century, But so it's harmonized because, it's in English. And when it's correctly done, it's a wonderful form.
I love the idea that, so the texture, the complexity increases,
Yeah.
But then, is there a place where you'd ever get dissonance, where
dissonance?
Dissonance.
Oh,
where
yes,
there's so much happening that it's almost cacophony.
Yeah. Well, there were. I have to tell you, there were writing counterpoint or polyphonic music, there were strict rules. You had to learn how to manipulate this voice so that it didn't break any rules that were set up. And that persisted for a long time. Students today, when they study 16th century counterpoint, have to write those rules, you know. And if you write a canon, which is another name for a round, if you will, there are hard and fast rules as to how to do that.
So the rules helps us to kind of stay within the boundaries, yet also you find experimentation, adaptation to what's necessary to help.
Yes, yes. And once you get into the, well, once you get into the late 19th century, things start to get a little bit more interesting in terms of dissonance.
Yeah.
And you finally come around to somebody like Schoenberg, who invents a whole new system, 12-tone music. That's a subject for another day.
I remember one Pentecost, I think the second or third Pentecost I was here, there was a piece that you played that was really interesting. It was, for me, it you know, like the chaos of...
Oh, that probably was the one with all the languages.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, where
yeah,
there was,
right.
it was just like, it was a chaotic type of experience. You could
Yeah,
feel the emotion of the music come out.
Yeah, no, I thought that, I think he did a very good job, actually.
I really enjoyed it, and I was just
Yeah.
thinking about that as we're talking about this, but I don't know if that was way after that.
That's way after it, and that didn't transpire into the liturgical music.
Okay.
I mentioned the Psalms, but there were also plain chant masses. And as you probably know, we here at the church, during the penitential seasons, the choir sings only plain chant masses. And some of those melodies that go way back to the 12th century, 8th century. In fact, the Pater Noster, that's very ancient. We're not even sure how old it is.
Yeah.
But that one is way back to ancient Greece, the melody, yeah. And this melody, for the blessing of the Psalms,
Yeah.
that's a terribly ancient melody. That was an epitaph for a guy who was an epitaph for his wife, and it's on the ancient island Greece of Tralles. It gets carried over and shows up in the Roman Gregorian. The epitaph reads in Greek, it's carved on a stone. It reads, a mortal's life is but a short time, use it wisely. Yeah,
Wow.
you know. And that suddenly becomes for the blessing of the palms on Palm Sunday. So it just shows you how things get carried forward.
I love that. A mortal's life is brief. Use it. What is it again?
A mortal's span is but for a short time.
But for a short time.
Use it wisely. Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit more elaborate than that, but that's the basic thought.
What was the title of that piece again?
Well, Hosanna to the Son of David.
Okay.
But it's an epitaph on a rock.
That might be used in my Ash Wednesday sermon today, this week.
We'll save it for Palm Sunday.
Yeah, yeah. George,
Well, I hope that's helpful.
no, this is great. So let me add one quick question, though. So then we move in the Anglican chant to the vernacular, right? And then you have to, and at that time, so it is polyphonic at that time, right?
Yes, but the Anglican chant, of course, becomes homophonic because it's vertical in structure.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, right.
Homophonic. Okay, great.
Harmonized as well, yeah, right.
Good.
But the chant has, I'll give you one other example, not of chant, but you might get a kick out of this. This is first sung Valentine.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
How do you do that?
1300s. Well, you got to sing it around. You got to You got to go around the bun. The Baud Cartier. It's a French thing.
Did the choir do this yet?
No. It's not. It's,
It's
no,
not.
it's secular. Quite
It's
secular. Yeah. Where there are red ink, that signifies that music is in triple meter. Black ink is duple meter.
Wow, that's
it's
a new.
very complicated. Yeah. And Archibald Davison, who was a very famous musicologist at Harvard, was the guy that transcribed that, and he spent quite a bit of time researching that piece and getting it out. And he wrote a little couplet in a published book, which reads, "Our friend Baud Cartier sat him down one St. Valentine's Day and made him a heart, which he sent to his tart. I wish the hell she'd thrown it away."
Okay, I don't know what to say about that.
I thought since Valentine's Day was yesterday, you'd get a kick out of it.
I did get a kick out of it. I hope that everyone does too. George, I want to thank you again for being with us today and explaining this a little bit. It's interesting. Is there any words of wisdom that you might be able to help us get out of this? The way music develops and it maybe adapts to the various time periods?
I don't know. I think it's a wonderful tradition that we have it, and I think there are a lot of gems from my standpoint of composition that are in the Renaissance, and some in medieval period also, and to be able to learn those with the choir and when they're appropriate, we get a chance to just keep that tradition moving forward. So,
yeah, and I also think it's just beautiful that there are these gems, and we can't necessarily always look forward to the future, thinking for the new, but we have to also appreciate what's there.
Oh yeah, no, you need to maintain the tradition because it's a wonderful tradition.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a rich heritage of sacred music in the Episcopal Church.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, I stopped at the Renaissance, but moving on through the next 300 years, there's a ton of wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, it's we're grateful that we have a treasure in you, George, to help us understand and appreciate that.
Just doing my thing, but anyway. One of these days we'll get back to doing it.
Yeah, and I did want to, one of these days maybe we'll even talk about John Coltrane. I hear, of course, that you have a jazz background too, and so forth.
Yeah, but I did. I stopped that in 1963.
1963.
It's amazing how much better I could hear the choir on Sunday morning.
Well, thank you, George. Folks, this is a time that we end our session. It was a long session, but it was also an informative one. And so let us end our time with a prayer. This is a prayer adopted for our particular challenge, the COVID-19 challenge, and it's a prayer written by Bishop Thomas Brown of Maine. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Jesus Christ, you traveled through towns and villages, curing every disease and illness. At your command, the sick were made well. Come to our aid now in the midst of the global spread of the coronavirus. Heal those who are sick with the virus. May they regain their strength and health through quality medical care. Heal us from our fear, which prevents nations from working together and neighbors from helping one another. Be present with those in authority who are making hard decisions. Support the medical professionals, emergency responders, our counselors and caregivers. We ask this all in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Join with me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Friends, go in peace to love and serve God, to spread the light of Christ. The world needs it right now. Thank you.